So, for instance, the origin of life, right? And even the incredible biological diversity of the living world consistently, it seems, defy any naturalistic explanation, right? And so, instead, powerful and persuasive empirical evidence points, he suggests, to design, right? And so, when there's a conflict between methodology and materialism, and you hold these two definitions, what happens is, for materialists, the philosophy always trumps the facts, right? So it goes over and above what you get from the methodology, right? In other words, if the methodology seems to be pointing toward a soul, right, or, some kind of design in nature, well, my philosophy, my materialistic, naturalistic philosophy has to trump over what my methodology seems to be claiming as the facts, right? And so modern science, he tells us, does not conclude from the evidence that design is not tenable. It assumes it, he says, prior to the evidence.
Right. So you have people like Stephen Myers, David Berlinski, David Glettner. They did this really interesting kind of sit down with PBS, and they talked about how as we know more and more about science, the more and more it appears that we're getting away from a non-intelligent entity to kind of kickstart it. Like, whether or not evolution is true or accurate, just talking about the methods to kickstart life, it's just not there. And Stephen Myers is a Christian, obviously. David Berlinski is not, but he even critiques Darwinism so much so. So just saying, well, if I pulled these three scholars say that Darwin is dead. Well, isn't it okay for us to then question, well, what are the reasons why they're saying that?
Yeah.
So when we talk about things like information, well, information always comes from a source that is also information. So how do we get information in the world without an informer, right?
Yeah.
kind of like that. So questioning where scholars are coming from is always good. It's really what we want. We don't want to just read the headlines. We want to understand that's what our goal here is, not to just cite the person, but to understand the reasons. So Stephen Myers says it because right. And so then you're bringing more to the table in your discussion.
Right. So someone might question, well, wait a minute, scientists don't do that. They don't say, well, it's the philosophy trumps the facts. They don't do that, right? they always go search for truth, and so they go to the facts.
Everybody is Mr. Spock.
Yeah. Well, he gives us a quote here by Richard Lewontin, and he says that he was amazingly candid about this fact, right? In the New York Review of Books, he made this, what he calls, stunning admission. All right, so this is rather a lengthy quote, but I think it's
really good. Yeah.
So notice, this is what Lewontin had to say. He said, our willingness to accept scientific claims that are against common sense is the key to an understanding of the real struggle between science and the supernatural. We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for unsubstantiated just so stories, because we have you ready? Here it is, a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism. It is not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but on contrary, that we are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. Moreover, that materialism is absolute. We cannot allow a divine foot in the door, right. End quote, right?
We don't want God in our science.
That's right.
You want your peanut butter and your chocolate, but you don't want chocolate and peanut butter mix.
And so the idea here is, notice he's claiming that the philosophy is driving what they do. And if there's a conflict between, even if it ends in a ridiculous kind of, conclusion, you gotta take it because you need to hold to your materialistic philosophy. right? And he kind of admits it.
Right. Yeah. We're forced by our a priori adherence to material causes. I mean, that's what we bring to the table. All science has to be material because that's really all we can measure and study, and that's fine and great and everything. But there are sometimes questions that lead us outside the realm of materialism, where we talk about metaphysics, and we talk about this as well. Some scientists don't like metaphysics except when they're actually talking about it, because again, that helps to give us reasons to understand why they're saying the things that they're saying. So understanding that scientists might pull from a weird area or come to weird conclusions that you're like, well, that doesn't seem to imply, the addition of information when things are breaking down. I'm not sure what that is. Well, that's just how it has to be because we came to be, and that's just how it must happen.
That's the way the material universe works. And so Coco, kind of ends this this quote. He comments on it here. He says, here Lewontin admits that the apparatus of science is geared not to find the truth, whatever it may be, but rather to produce philosophically acceptable answers. He openly admits that the game has been rigged.
Right. Modern science concludes that modern science does not conclude from the evidence that design is not tenable. It assumes it prior to the evidence. So that's what we're talking about when the attack on creationism or intelligent design comes into play there.